Hello. So it's been a battle this morning. I was last making live streams, and the truth is I'm not in a place to make live streams at the moment, but the irony is at the same time it's the only thing that can distract me from so I'm making a live stream. The thing that, as I was rolling in pain from side to side, I was trying to think, what can I do, what can get me out of this place. I was thinking about, is it the right time for exercise? Is it possible to use some therapy devices? And believe it or not, the answer was no for all those options. And then it started to get worse, and as it was getting worse, as happens when I'm in pain, the idea of making a live stream popped to mind, and it was like, yes, I can actually do that. So as much as I don't really want to, I have to. Or, well, it's a choice. I can either continue that suffering, or I can with the unpleasantness of not really wanting to make a live stream at the moment, and accept it that I need to make a live stream. So I'm making a live stream. And the thought that popped into my mind, the ideas that were sort of coming to me at the time, me to think about a live stream is what I'm going to talk about at the moment. It's a little bit premature. I normally consider, because what happened is this idea, it's been forming in terms of my understanding of the spiritual world for a while, in reference to the Indian culture, the Vedic culture. And it was just a loose idea, let's put it like that. And then the other day I was thinking about, I think it was yesterday, the Japanese culture. And I sort of stumbled upon it, and there's been some, and I'm going to get into the detail, but I'm just setting the context. But with the Japanese culture, there's something that bothers me about it. I mean, I love the Japanese culture, I love the samurai. I mean, and with the samurai, what I love the most is Bushido. And Bushido is basically the ethos to life. So we live, nothing to do with the samurai battle and the samurai sword and all of that stuff. It's like what would have bound the community at the time when the samurai were meant to have been about. That's what I love most about it. It's like if you watch The Last Samurai, which is what it is, and you see Tom Cruise, and I don't know the Japanese actors by name, but you see them in the fields and in the settings where the community is, that's what I fell in love with. And I can't remember how I got to the idea, but this is where I'll get into the challenge that needs to be added, and that is within my spiritual development, my spiritual learnings and understandings, the Vowel of Amnesia, and it makes. And what does that mean? A Vowel of Amnesia basically means a great deal of our past. Well, you could say, to back that up, you've got the Egyptian cultures, you've got many South American civilizations, you've got the Vedic culture, you've got the ancient Taoists and the wisdom they had in terms of life. The Mayans were meant to have been, from our estimation, you know, that's a huge population for supposedly only 5,000 years ago. And just need to grab a cup. And these are all really advanced cultures. I mean, were meant to have been basically power plants for the entire planet, with chambers of water that run underneath them, that flowed from the Nile, and underneath them, whatever the energetic circuitry was, it was meant to have been like a power plant. And if you understand energetics and the advanced energetics, you don't rule it out as a possibility. I mean, if you look at the pyramids, they were meant to have been built by hand, but then you look at Stonehenge, group of what were the Druids? Land without an advanced culture, and somehow they picked up these massive boulders from Wales, transferred them to Glastonbury. Sorry, I don't know I'm terrible with the boroughs, not boroughs, but the areas that it's within. Is not Somerset. I'd know it if someone said it, but I can't remember. And they were meant to have transferred these large, I think they're blue rocks, they're meant to be called, from Wales all the way to Glastonbury, and assembled them in such a structure and placed them on top of it with astrological what would you call it, dynamics, alignments. Again, with the Maori in New Zealand, they have similar things. The pyramids, I think, are a reflection of the sky in terms of Orion's belt. God knows what all the pyramids in South America were, and the pyramids all around the world that we don't really acknowledge to our full consciousness now. And we can't explain it. And why do the pyramids in Giza reflect Orion's belt? Nobody knows. Nobody says it. There's a certain level of amnesia there. In my head, listening to the wisdom of the Vedic culture, the Indian culture, in terms of healing and health, and looking at modern day India, how they're willing to for all intensive purposes leave all that wisdom, basic fundamental building blocks of life wisdom. In other words, before you start thinking about how you're going to travel to another planet, how you're going to build an mobile phone and all of that stuff, you've got to have health in your body. And they had that wisdom. And they're willing to totally leave it for Western culture. In other words, in India is not of their tradition. Why is that? I'm just gonna move the phone over to another side because I'm still struggling with the pain. Just got to put the phone on charge. There we go. Otherwise it'll be an abrupt ending to this live stream. And then something bugged me about the Japanese culture, because the Japanese culture, from my understanding, is like they took the best of all the different cultures and then further refined it. For instance, it's a fantastic system that I've been lucky in my life to have had parents that were willing to break from the Western norm, ill health, and instead of we had, again, we were very lucky. My mum was we weren't an abundant family. We struggled a lot, but one thing my mum prioritized £1,000 a month for private health insurance. That's how much it costs here in the UK. I don't know if it was more or less, but it's in and around that amount, which isn't a great deal. But I remember from the age of about, and I remember one time I was very ill, very, very ill, to the extent that on the way to the Chinese doctor, I was throwing up and letting go below in the car park. It wasn't like all the time that we'd go to the Chinese doctor to resolve ill health, but it was just as normal as going to the NHS or going private. And the Japanese took that wisdom and they further refined it. They understood that it's to get something from the herb in water, and they just ground the herbs. So when the Chinese do herbalism, they use a powder, they further refined it. And to a certain extent, what people talk about of the samurai, it's the same thing. Because you look at the Chinese culture with martial arts, and when you begin to look into the martial arts, superior health systems, again, because they tap into energy and they have a very, very fundamental understanding of energy. I mean, it boggles the mind to a certain extent. My favourite martial art, I have my reasons for it being my favourite, Wing Chun, which is meant to, one of the moves, one of the training exercises is to just flop your wrist, and instead of moving forward in a slow motion with like a punch, you flop your wrist, and you do it with like a wrist. I mean, that just doesn't make any logical sense, does it? But then you get into the further wisdom of the Chinese culture, the great understanding of the I Ching and all of. I've never really done too much study on the I Ching, but I think it's a way of divining information from the universe. And that's the Chinese culture. So when you begin to understand the martial arts, it's not just movement, like, oh, when they do this, I do that. And when they do this, I do that. And at the moment, I'm calming down from the anxiety of the fight this morning. And this is my martial art, to lie in bed screaming in pain. I always lose, but I guess I'm training. But in terms of the Chinese martial arts systems, they embody more wisdom than just the movement and the intent to win. You understand that, for instance, they have internal martial arts too, Qi Gong, Nei Gong, and all of the like. Qi Gong can also be but there's a great wisdom and intelligence that we don't understand now. And for all intensive purposes, the Japanese sort of like trumped it. They were like, energy, okay. We've just created how long is a samurai sword? A 4 or 5 foot piece of very, very, very. Come and do your movements and your energy practices, and I'll just carry my samurai sword. The battle will be over very quickly. So it's that sort of way I view the Japanese culture. And what I see in in every aspect is Bushido. But within the Japanese culture, the stories of the ninja are rife. But then I became aware that the ninjas didn't exist. The ninjas were meant to be like that never really happened. And coming back to the Indian culture, and I think it's like, you know, the movie Moses. I think it's Moses when they see all the people worship, and they realize there's something wrong. I can't remember the story in its entirety, but why are you worshipping a golden ball? If you want to worship something, there's God or gods, depending upon the religion. There's energy, there's love. Why are you worshipping a golden ball? And that's when it really comes into play, the Vedic culture, because my journey through the Hinduism and understanding and taking the spiritual wisdom from Hinduism has been a slow journey, and it's always been one based in appreciation, and spirituality is love for me, so love. But the stories they tell, Ganesh, and the stories I'm autistic, and with my autism, and this is probably why I'm so spiritual, is a lot of the spiritual wisdom that comes to me, I don't poo-poo it until I know it's poo, or I know it's not worthy. Saying poo isn't right, especially exact what I'm about to say, so please ignore that. In no way am I referencing what I'm about to say as poo. In fact, it's the complete opposite. So at the basis, we have to realize that we're going through some sort of collective amnesia. We don't remember our past. Insanity we see in the world in modern days. Wars and injustice and the diet. I mean, I was thinking yesterday again, ending, and I could be wrong, but in terms of life, there's one culture that has, which should be the fundamental, and it's not just healing, because healing is saying that we're diseased in the first place, but healing can be a curing of the, also be a case of further work, further training, and further advancement of our physical, energetic, mental, spiritual. And what I know of the Native American Indian culture, which I clocked yesterday. I mean, I've had training in the Native American ways at a very, very far distance. We all know the commonalities. You've got the sweat lodge, you've got the smoking ceremonies, you've got the dancing, you've got the drumming. And you can't, it's not singing as we know it, but it's definitely alive. And with singing, it activates emotions, and with emotions, it's life. So it's a very, very high advanced type of singing with a very, very specific purpose. And again, with the Native American Indians, you get that energy of Bushido to a little bit more of a relaxed extent. And Bushido, in my head, is all about putting this thing within this rock in the right place to live. And how is it that we have one culture, and I'm sure the indigenous cultures count, but in terms of the black tribe, red tribe, yellow tribe, white tribe, brown tribe, that still try and embody a means of life that's healing. Unfortunately, the Aboriginal tribe have to work. They don't have the abundance of the land anymore because Australia is very barren. And they actually have to work. They actively burn the land. A nomadic lifestyle to live. And what they're given by life and the world and nature is very, very little. So it's in my head, in my mind, in my spiritual understanding, I suspect because of the way they apply themselves to what they're given, it's almost a certainty that in the right setting, the Aboriginal tribe would count too. But it's not seen. So back to the Indian culture. with the Indian culture, it's confusing to the modern born with 1985 in the same world that you live in, with the same external stimuli, with the same, to a certain extent, culture, because I live in a Western culture. Western culture is the world religion, and one way or another we're all following capitalism as God. And because I've been born in London and I've been raised in London, places in the world, you know, that help promote capitalism, it's considered the 51st state of the American dream. America, you'd credit for capitalism, though I don't know the history of capitalism, where it was originated and all of that, and who promotes it the most and all of that. But the American dream is the idea of capitalism, and well, the Americans' purposes won the war between capitalism and communism, so they have the credit to a layman that doesn't do politics and is looking at. But you have to ask, the Egyptian culture, the wisdom of healing through sound, the wisdom of the Tibetans too, given Tibetan Buddhism, they'd be in the same category as American Indians. They have yoga within their tradition, they have a spiritual practice, they have, I don't know the wisdom in terms of for the Tibetans, but the Tibetans go a great deal in that direction. But with the Egyptian culture, they had wisdom in terms of advanced energetics. They had wisdom, nourishment. For instance, they were aware blue lotus, the plant, helped with it helps with not sexual stimulation, but it helps with sorry, my mind's gone blank. Speak my way through this like an idiot, but it sexual system in the body, and it goes a long way to making life enjoyable in that direction. It also goes a great deal of the way of helping the body to relax. The Egyptians were also meant to have travelled to Australia. There are cave paintings in Australia of pharaohs on boats rocking up there. I wonder how that happened. They couldn't have been idiots if they advanced energetics. No, they went out and travelled. They communicated. They went to Australia. And then you look at Egypt as a reference for the whole of Africa, and gutting for myself that all the wisdom of Africa is hidden. The extent that I know that Africa had advanced civilization, South Africa, and you get these weird, strange standing stone circles that with energetic reading devices strong, consistent, energetic reading, that these circular stands, they're meant to be a lot smaller. I've held one. It's about, the one I held was about 2-3 feet. And they have a ring to them like bells. If you tap them, the stones that ring like bells, and they suck energy down from above into the earth. Now, unfortunately, as I said, the wisdom of Africa. But you've got the Dogon, who are the, I'll tell you something, my theory is if it was all the internet connections, every single human, we all had the perfect nourishment, we all had the perfect lifestyles. The Dogon tribe in Africa, I think it's North Africa, I could be mistaken, would be the top dogs. They'd be the smartest fuckers going. Spiritual level, they're connected with the dolphin tribe, and dolphins are very clever, are a very clever species. But it's all hidden, and unfortunately it comes down to me being aware of the wisdom of Africa from a record, the rapper, where empires in Africa called Kush. And he goes on to say about how philosophy, religion, the list goes on, were born in Africa. And that lines up with my spiritual understandings. But unfortunately, where is that information for me to do further research? I'm sure it's there hidden on the internet somewhere, but about spiritual information for a good few years now, I'm not able to do that within my life, and I'm sure. But every so often I'll hear something and it makes sense to the foundations of the spiritual learnings that I've sought out up until it stopped being able. Given the right circumstances, that's all I'll be doing, man. Researching spirituality, finding out our true spiritual past, our true past. Breaking that Vowel of Amnesia that the whole planet has been put through. And then you've got the Tibetans, again, the link with the Egyptians. Afterlife. They wrote a book. The Egyptian, was it the Book of the Afterlife? I can't remember, something, the Book of the Dead. Process of the afterlife. And so too do the Tibetans, the Book of the Living and the Dying. And they talk about bardo. Really and truly, I should be reading it, given that I believe I'm in a coma or some sort of afterlife state. But as I said, my life doesn't really allow for that at the moment. So really, really advanced. I mean, you've got to be sort of done with this life, like maxed out the wisdom that you can apply to this life before you start thinking about, right, we need to start looking at the afterlife and how we can so we've got 3 very advanced cultures. I mean, the ancient Greeks, to a certain extent, you've got mathematics, you've got a more grounded modern day application of spirituality, but they went to war all the time, they killed themselves all the time. So the wisdom they had in terms of politics. There's a specific thing, it might come to me in a minute or something, but the way to live in this world to a certain extent. But there's no wisdom in terms of nutrition there again. The fundamentals, and they went about killing themselves in wars and battles all the time. Spiritual understanding that really does excel past this modern for us. And because we have iPhones, Teslas, we're thinking about sending a robot to Mars. We think we're enlightened. We think we're going to become enlightened on a personal, individual, spiritual, bodily, energetic level with Nike kicks and iPhones. We're ignorant that way. We can't see that enlightenment is something more. And all of these ancient cultures talked about enlightenment. But with Indian culture, I started to get the impression that it was how can I put it? I'm trying to remember how I came to the realization so I can put it across clearly enough in this live stream. And I think it's just the fact that with all that wisdom, and the simplicity of it is, they worshipped, they worship, not worship, but modern day, that culture, that wisdom, they have the practice of Hinduism, but they're a part of this world. They've left the fundamentals, Ayurveda. So for me, there's something missing in modern day Indians to the truth of where they've come from. And the one thing that stood out is that they really do worship, not, I don't know if it's a cow or a bull or an ox, but they hold. And it just didn't ring true. That one thing didn't ring true. And as I said, I've not pushed it away. I've in fact because the wisdom that came to the West was from India. Krishnamurti back in the 70s, autobiography of a yogi with Paramahansa Yoginanda. Well, I'm terrible with names. But he came to the West and he spread the wisdom. And essentially what's happened is it was left at that from what I think. Playing up. And then as I became more aware on a different perspective of our spiritual connection in terms of aliens and spiritual roots in the sky, I began to realize that there is a lie that's taking place. There's an amnesia that's taking place on a collective level, globally. And with amnesia, you have to question everything. And as I said, the Greeks, for all their wisdom on philosophy, they had Zeus with the lightning bolt, and they had God, and they had that good. That doesn't ring true to me. And they killed themselves in wars and battles. That doesn't ring true to me. as an enlightened race. But what it is, I think the Greeks, they present themselves on a more grounded level. So those contradictions discredit the wisdom they had. But it's also to the same extent within the Ayurvedic wisdom of the holding a bull and a knife above any other animal, above any other human, above anything else, just didn't ring true. Quite down here in terms of wisdom, this is how my mind works. The Egyptians would be here, and the Tibetans would be here. The Indians, the Hinduism, the wisdom, the Vedic culture is up here. And they've got this little thing, and it's the same disparity as the gods and the wars discredit the Greek culture. It's the same way that they were enlightened in my head. I mean, they were able to see an atom thousands of years ago. Understand that. But with that wisdom, why are you not worshipping, but why are you holding a cow as sacred? And it just discredits it to the same extent. And I hold these questions within me until I find answers, and there was no real want or thinking I was ever going to come out and make a live stream about this anytime soon. But as I said, as I'm looking at the planet in terms of our spiritual, the Oriental tribe, that's what I call the yellow tribe. The yellow tribe doesn't quite ring true in my ears. Say the other four colours and tribe, so I call them the Oriental nation tribe, or the Oriental tribe. And with them, what I started to begin to see, and this could be a mistake, but what I began to see is they have links to Mars. And with Mars has links to Arcturus. Now from there, you begin the warrior in the sky, he's held as the warrior. They're about being on point with war. But they're an enlightened species. You also have love. You also have consciousness and wisdom. How modern day war is taking place. You can almost see where the Oriental tribe, the Martian tribe, the Arcturians would have gone to in terms of war, and that is being like a bonsai tree. Absolute least possible amount. And if we take modern day war into account, and this is all theory, but I leave it up to you to make up your mind about what's truth within our amnesia. First we had people go back in the day fist fighting, the Chinese martial arts. Then you had swords and bow and arrows. Then we got it down to guns. So we're up to the First World War. I don't know if there were planes in the first, but that's where it was at. And we had to send massive amount of people out to win wars. In other words, Whoever's got the most people with the most guns wins. That. Then you get to the Second World. Technology has advanced. We've got tanks, we've got planes. I mean, they developed planes that could fly through advanced mathematics, the Germans, and hit London unmanned. And essentially, war started to progress and it started to get silly. And then we developed the nuclear bomb with the Second World War, and it was like, right, this is real. Mano against mano. This is like any cunt with a brain and pardon my language, I'm just not in a place to censor myself there. Can pretty much rule the. And well, you've got a few people with plutonium and brains, and that pretty much ruled everybody else out. War became like, I don't know how, in terms of weaponry in this world, but right now it's Russia and America. I know, I think Israel might have it. Yeah, Israel does have it. The UK likely has it. And that's me just thinking 2, 3, 4, 5 more, who knows? So war became serious, everybody sort of shit themselves, and war was left to what? And America's the top dog, and America's been to wars and wars and wars. What's taken place over the past 20 odd of drones? And with drones, they can be and they should be, which they're not, but they should be absolutely specific in terms of, right, let's just take out the people we need to take out. The bonsai tree approach. And when you've got dropping massive nuclear bombs on a country to say, look, stop, because we have the power, we can take out 2 whole of, with what would have been 2 firings of a gun one day, or 2 bow and arrows once upon a time. You know, you can well imagine the snipers won wars and the bow and arrow snipers. But you get to the point, and this does all link in, but with war, drones are the way. They win wars with less catastrophe. It's arguable how, what's the word? They are, but less lives are lost. And it could be a case of one day, you know, a satellite and take them out, and one day it could be that America is left as the only country in the world at the moment, or another country who develops the technology and their pinpoint accuracy. But that's war. You don't want to lose innocent lives if you can. You want to win with the least loss to yourself. And why do you want to kill another human being if there's no need? when the whole point is just to win. And I started to look at the Oriental tribe in that way. And then I looked at Japan and the of the ninja. Realised that, hang on a second, Japanese are Oriental as well. They embody the Arcturian energy. They embody war. And the whole way to win wars is... And well, the ninjas are that way. So I began to see it, that, and it gets into spiritual politics now, because with Japan it's pretty much, from my understanding, the resting point of our collective trauma. The Ainu, something like that again. The original inhabitants linked to the Reptilian tribe, and at the moment the Reptilians are, well, the Illuminati and the Reptilians are, well, the ones that, to my understanding, are causing the modern day suffering within our amnesia. But that links back to an earlier pain, when the Reptilians stood alongside every other human. And due to our within our enlightenment, we're talking about the times of Atlantis now. This is just my understanding, taking into account Drumvalo Melchizedek's work, The Flower of Life books. He talks about how there was a comet on its way to hit planet Earth. Between two tribes, well, between one, he referenced them as Martians, so it could actually be the Arcturians again, the Oriental tribe, and they wanted to advance technology. And the rest of us living in Atlantis, flying on magic carpets and teleporting and everything else. Emotional wisdom, this is what Drumvalo references it as. In other words, we were childlike within our wisdom of life and suffering. We were advanced within our minds and what we could do with our bodies and the world. But in terms of suffering, we were... Whereas obviously the Reptilians, the Martians, were a bit more aware. And as I said, we got on side by side and we were a collective. So the decision was made together as a collective race. And in irony, what's just taken place in my mind is the story restructuring in a different way than what I could have ever imagined. So this could be wrong, because my spirituality is a constant working process through the amnesia. We have to question everything and not deny everything, anything. And the point that we know for certain is when the amnesia is totally removed, so nothing really ever gets poo-pooed. You can't do that if you're honest with yourself in terms of breaking through the amnesia. Consciousness folds. If you hear spirituality, like what's just taken place within my mind, which I'm going to share, it always changes to our understanding and to the very point that we know. So they said, look, let's just blow it out of the sky. We don't need to suffer. And The rest of us, the Atlanteans, said, no, no, no. We live by nature. We live by spirit. We can absorb whatever it is. We are not touching nature. And where did the comet hit? In the heartland of the Martians. So you can pissed off at our ignorance towards life and spirituality and our enlightenment, really reflective of modern day world. And well, they went to work. They're the reptilians are modern day bad guys. They were essentially us in Atlantis. And the reptilians, I understand, they were the original inhabitants of Japan. So when the Martians got pissed off, they invaded Japan. And with that came Japanese modern day culture, all the way back to what is ever documented thereafter. The Ainu or Ayu or whatever they're called were forced out. With that, what you're looking at is saying, oh no, the Oriental Yellow Tribe are the bad guys. Oh, we've got to go and retaliate. We've got to go and do this to them, that to them, the other thing to them. Yesterday, with the realization that with war, you have to be precise like a bonsai tree. Minimum taken off. It's an art, the art of war. And what they did, they created a whole culture with Bushido. Even if they don't actively seek people, you feel, as I said, just watch the movie of The Last Samurai, see the setting in the fields. That's Bushido as an energy of a way of life. And it's not too dissimilar to modern day Japan, considering Japanese the same way as the rest of us, capitalism. Don't forget, Japan was one of the strongest economies back in the 90s. It was like the second or third economy. They had the World War II. They got absolutely devastated. And from there, they thought, fuck this, we're going to go and save life. Otherwise, we're done for. And they went out and they took hold of capitalism. It's a very strange thing because just on that subject, the way they ruled capitalism was of money left in the banks. This was the way when they were strong in the 90s. And all of a sudden, a different culture's taken over Japan, where they no longer hold massive amount of money in capital in the banks, in reserve. Now, why would they change that if they were so strong to become more and take that away? I don't understand it. But since then, their economy isn't as strong as it once was. Not that it's weak in comparison to a lot of countries in the world, but it's not number 3. And that's a very strong thing for such a small nation that lives in such a volatile place with earthquakes and everything so rife. To war, back to amnesia, and you realise whatever's taken place we don't remember. And it could have been in and around the time when that comet hit, which wasn't likely to have been too long before the Ainu were asked to leave. I'm going to call them the Ainu for the rest of this. And well, if you know Japanese culture, they kept themselves to themselves for many years. Many years. It wasn't probably the last 2, 3, I don't know when it was, the last few centuries when they opened up to the rest of the world with argument, ironically, one another film that I've seen, and that is is it Silence? And it's another tall guy, very not peculiar, but very striking appearance. And apparently it was basically when, with the Crusades, they went to Japan and tried to teach them about Christianity and everything that went on with that. So it was probably in and around that time that Japan began to realize they had to open up. We're talking about within the past 1,000 years. Before that, nobody knows. But we know that the stories of the samurai, we know the stories of the ninja, we know everything else within it. And I just want to just mention something else that really strikes me about Japanese culture, and that's karate. Because they have karate inadequate martial art in comparison to what the Chinese have created. Not just Wing Chun, but the many other martial arts. It's just, they're all far superior than karate. And then only one location in Japan, Okinawa, take karate to the max. Oh, there we go. You look at the people, and they are fit. They are like in their bodies. As I said, it's a different thing with karate, and they have a physique. People who do karate, I mean, properly and do karate. The thing is, karate isn't actually there to be held in terms of fighting. It's there as an exercise. Structure, the posture of the body. Because with karate, you get an abnormal bend in the back and a flaring of the lats, and then a curvature at the top. In people who really practice it, and you don't really get that physique anywhere else. But I believe that physique, Egyptians, in terms of how they pulled down the wisdom from the stars, it's a bit, how can I put it? It's a bit vague, that there's too much amnesia there for me to get a precise anything to share more than that at the moment, but that's where my mind is looking at it at. So it's more of an exercise for the posture, but nowhere does they state karate is for as an exercise. It's as a martial art. Comparison to what the Chinese put out, and the Japanese are all about refining. As I said, World War II, the Japanese got done. Within 50 years, they took over the world. That is the Japanese way. bullet trains, the technology, they're the most advanced in the world. Sure, China produces it all, but they're not stupid. The Japanese own most of the lithium reserves in the... They're not stupid at all. And it's the theory that it's the other way round. The story of the samurai. It wouldn't have taken much for an advanced culture to have used their wisdom of war, used wisdom of the war, to create pretty much the ultimate warrior, the ultimate fighting tribe. And there was peace for a long period. Well, I don't know how long is, but there was a period of time that peace was held within a fighting culture. And I tell you what, from the stories of anybody holding a sword and going into a war, I would not like to be up against a samurai. The spy from the European in terms of swordsmanship and shield, an arrow. The Romans got a little bit advanced with technology and they started to advance it, but even still, the Romans, I wouldn't like to be a Roman or a Spartan against the samurai. They'll do you in an instant. Have you seen how... And you got Spartans prancing pants with a face mask, and the Romans with their robotic understanding of war, advanced in that sense than the Spartans, but against the samurai you've got no chance. But in my head now, it's all a myth. They specifically designed the armour. They designed the whole theory around the samurai. All the stories, all the battles, and they got it down to an absolute perfection. This is what I'd do. Every single minute detail. From this level of perception, but from an advanced race. There's no way they couldn't do it. And they probably lived in peace, chilled out. They were probably smoking by the campfires. You know, well, I suppose you can't really see that within Bushido. But they've been at work ever since. They created the story of the samurai, of the ninja. Whenever they needed to fight and go to war, they sent a few or two out, cut off the queen's head, serpent's head, whatever that analogy is, take out top of the pyramid, and you win. No, least possible bloodshed. Really comprehend a ninja, can you? Because they're almost like otherworldly with those star discs that they throw. It's like how much perfection do you need within an art to master a throwing whatever thing they are, and everything else they had. But the reason is because when we came back and we found Japan and we began to look in and we saw the truth, so supposedly, of the samurai, because they went to work on making it look true. Reptilian tribe have would be aimed at the samurai. All that pain of our collective pain of what we suffered, because as much as we were ignorant in our suggestion of, oh, let's not blow it out the sky, the comet, when it hit. We were based in love, and that's why we said it. And it would have hurt even more the fact that it hit the Martian tribe when they specifically said, let's blow it out. Collective pain. And somewhere along the lines we've suffered an amnesia. And within the Atlanteans, the Reptilians, repeating, the Reptilians were Atlantean. And they're firing all their anger, like looking at Japan now, sussing it out. The stories of the samurai, right, they're samurai, that's how they think. That's all that pain of all that mass, right? We can't take this anymore as however many million or billion we were back in Atlantean times. And I just have to credit he's studied in the Flower of Life work by Drumvalo and Melchizedek. He's been to the proper workshops and everything else. And where I've been broken down in absolute turmoil and depression on a personal level for the past few weeks, more than I've ever suffered in my life. Couple of people I've had any contact with. So it's really, really strange that this wisdom of Power of Life works is coming to me right now when I've been in contact with him. So I have to pay any credit of coming to any realization of wisdom. But through that collective pain, like I'm experiencing, experience it. And if someone offered me a red pill and a blue pill, and one of the pills was a way of amnesia, I'd take it right now. I wouldn't have a choice. The pain is too much, and that's just my personal pain. Imagine being as enlightened as an Atlantean and seeing that catastrophic suffering with the utmost love and consciousness as a result of a mistake, of judgment, when we are meant to be conscious. It's unthinkable. The collective pain was so much, and we went into a state of amnesia. And this gets to time, and this is where I go back to the Indian culture in a second. So all that hatred from the reptilians, who were really hard done by the retaliation from the Martians, they're the ones that hold the pain for the whole world. And their whole pain is being thrown at the world. And the Japanese, specifically the samurai, you know, when they were on top in terms of being warriors, as the people to hate. And all of that hatred story. Because in irony, what I believe the samurai enacted within when they committed harikuri, I think again the names I'm always mispronouncing them, but you can get the general gist of what I mean. When they lost the battle, they were caught, and that was shameful for them, and they cut to kill themselves. They cut their hara from left to right, I believe. It's representative also of births. So because reptilians are sending all their hate to a fictitious story, Nobody absorbs that pain. It just gets, well, whatever. I think as long as the Japanese are constantly at work, they can work through the pain. It's not a problem. But in reflection on a consciousness spiritual perspective of caesarean birth, and I believe within caesarean birth it's a solution in a way to our collective problem by making life possible again when it shouldn't be. Because and I'll just touch on it very quickly. The birthing process is a 9-month period where it's linked to the planet of Venus, and Venus is love, blah, blah, blah. I believe our original birthing cycle was linked to Nibiru, and Nibiru is probably the planet that lies just after Mars. That probably links to this story, and I haven't sussed it out. The asteroid belt, it looks like a broken planet for all purpose. Nibiru in our solar system, linked to us in one way or another. It's meant to come round in cycles, but God knows when that's going to be. We have no documentation in terms of astrology of it that I'm aware of. It might be, but it just looks like that could be Nibiru, and that could be linked to this problem. And the whole solution for humanity is to get our consciousness in terms of the birthing process linked back to Nibiru, in which time we can regain our immortality, and we can regain our ability to consciously create life through virgin births, you'd call it, or whatever. We don't need to enact in this process that we're doing that shortens life to such an extent there that I'm not going to go into at the moment. Theory is that with the samurai, there's a saying, when they cut open their hara, their spirit is meant to stay locked into the earth to terror. Fuck me, man, what a story to tell your enemies. So in other words, whenever the reptilians have a problem, it's like, those pesky samurai, I can feel them when it's just themselves. And because it's polarized against the truth, when that anger goes to the samurai, I'm just guessing, but it could be that love is given to the mother and child that experience the caesarean birth as a result of action. So this is the wisdom we're talking about, that the Oriental tribe have, the Martians have, the Arcturians have, that are all the same. This is their advantage. Healing through war. They created a fictitious ultimate warrior at the time, embedded it into the Martians' enemies. They didn't respond to us not listening to their state with anger and ignorance themselves. No, they responded through love by realizing that we needed to learn their wisdom of. So they enacted this process, and it's a process of healing for their entire planet. But it all looks like war. So the truth is, the ninja, the lie is the samurai. coming back to the Indian Vedic culture, where I believe they have the cycles of time as a theory, they give that to the whole world. The whole world basically, because you realize that we're just going to go round in samskara over and over and over. Happy times, and then we'll go back to the dark times, and it'll be even darker times, and it'll be in the middle times. But what it was, understanding of energetics, understanding the process of what had taken place, and to get a pinpoint accuracy of when this cycle would end. And it's only one cycle in the context of the past and everything else in the but they looked for a very specific reason with patient of time as a concept to see when the healing would take place and the pain and suffering and amnesia would end. And to find, they took into account every energetic action that contributed to it, pardon myself, and they played it out to the end of time. And for that they had to create a concept of time. Here, from the Vedic tradition, in terms, there's truth and a lie within it. The truth is they had the wisdom to see it all, to find out just one point. And I can't say in time, one point. They had to create a concept of time. But they don't tell us the truth, that it's for our healing, just to realize this one point at the end of this cycle, which they had to understand. And then time doesn't exist. The circles break. There's no more. Or at least if there are, the wisdom comes back to us where they just don't affect us. But they're not going to tell the whole world that. So exactly how it ends, I don't know, but that's everything that I've understood of this mass story of the circle of life. And didn't really want to share this, but I have shared it, and I'm discomfort in my body, and I just want to end the live stream now, if I'm honest. Don't really want to. But maybe you can begin to see what your understanding of the world is in terms of our history and our humanity and our consciousness and enlightenment. With that understanding, advancement is also lies can be told, or lies can be heard without the appropriate consciousness to see it. And it could even be to the extent that we all came together because of the pain, and we realized we had to forget within the unconscious. And this is reflective of advanced matrix, NFT, about, but basically they understand that almost almost flips again, consciousness folding, where it almost goes from one side, oh, I've hurt myself, let's go to the other side, oh, I've hurt myself, let's go back. And what they did, because the pain was so much, we all got together as a collective planet to recreate an entirely story of our past. So it could be that purposes, when you think about Atlantis, you think about Santorini, you think about Greece, you think about, well, I think about North Africa, you think about the Aryan race. We're meant to have been blue air, and that links back to the ancient Greeks as well. Sounds very Greek to a certain extent. And they wrote in all of these stories about gods and wars and battles within them. Because we're an enlightened species back then, we went to work. Japanese. In argument, the Indian culture, the only thing that really bugs me, other than in terms of the stories that they tell of Shiva and Shakti, I can't picture them in any way in reference to this world, as easily as I can do other cultures. Sacred cow, the sacred bull, or whatever it is. That was the one thing. And then you get to the Mayans, and they just kept changing themselves, you know. They kept saying, and it was the Aztecs, and they just kept changing. Let's ride the flow of the trauma. Okay, we've done it like this, and let's try and like that. As pyramids were built on top of pyramids. So in other words, they had a base pyramid. The location is important. Oh, we don't like the look of it this way. Let's change it. Let's do it a different way. Let's dance a different way. And they kept changing themselves as a result of their past, which makes it look like invaders. The Africans managed to wipe out their entire history. Empires in Africa. Australia, as we said, the consciousness is hidden within the work of the Aboriginals and not being able to see their consciousness. The Druids were all about knowing and not writing down anyway, so they left the circles, standing circles all over the country to just confuse the fuck out of people because they don't know anything. And then it gets to the extent that we can't even see our own human relationship to our spiritual ancestry, which should be the most fundamental thing in my head. It gives us the most clues as to where we've come from. Like the wife of Akhenaten, one of the kings or pharaohs of Egypt, elongated skulls. They had elongated skulls and probably dresses and, you know, oh, okay, let's hide our history. The pyramids weren't advanced. Like energy's coming through at the moment. The pyramids weren't advanced. The power plants, no. Let's put a coffin in. Oh, it was a burial chamber for one of their pharaohs. I don't know what other cultures I'm forgetting, but it's easily hidden. The possible truth is the Chinese culture, the ancient Taoist, is the most accurate. But then you've got the terracotta army, which basically says exactly what I'm fucking saying. And with that story, this is how I'm going to leave it. It's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener. But it's also better to be a gardener that can out of terracotta and win a war.